Howdy everyone. I am the Hearth Guy, purveyor of video game worlds, especially when I can look at them from a narrative or internal consistency perspective. And this is my tour guide to the four main quest factions of Skyrim. Skyrim as a game has been good to me, as it's been a part of my life since I was in grade school. Feel old, anyone? And one of the most memorable parts of Skyrim, for better or worse, has been its playable factions, which I have talked about plenty over 4 individual videos that are now compiled here for your viewing pleasure. Since I know plenty of you like listening to me like I'm a podcast or something, and having to go from one video to another while you're doing something can be a tedious pain. The same reason applies to those who are new to the channel and at some point just want to turn on one video and not worry about it rather than going through the playlist. Also, I think some of you listen to me to go to sleep too, which is both flattering and hard to process. But ignoring that tangent, let's cut the chatter and get right into what you're here for. This is my tour guide to the quest factions of Skyrim. Magic is a tool that has, in a lot of stories, especially in video games, tried to be integrated in a seamless, even realistic way. Maybe you make it a complex science, an emotion-based power, or you do what the Elder Scrolls did and start laughing maniacally as they say, yes, the magic does come from the stars and sun, which are actually holes in the sky fabric, why are you asking? And certain groups in this world dare to look at that and say, yes, I would like to play with powers beyond imagining. Some do it well, others purposefully don't, and some are the College of Winterhold. Hey, I'm the Hearth Guy, and while I adore some mages, this ain't it, Chief. The College of Winterhold is easily the most self-destructive and irresponsible and painfully unstable factions in all of Skyrim, if not Tamriel, where, if you're being charitable, they almost allowed the universe to explode because of one elvish guy with the worst poker face ever. Of course, to explain why that is, I have to explain a bit about magic in Elder Scrolls. The magic of the Elder Scrolls comes in various schools, although the number and names change over time. Understandable when the average mage of Tamriel is only guessing that they know what they're doing. Flip a coin whenever something bad happens, because it's a 50-50 chance that a mage did it, intentionally or otherwise. That's because magic is really weird in Nirn, as mages draw from magicka, which in turn seeps into the world through the stars and sun that are holes in reality created whenever Magnus, the god of magic and architect of the world, left the mortal plane alongside a bunch of his star children. Magicka is treated as though it's a remnant of Magnus on Nirn, and the study of magic in an official capacity actually began here, at the College of Winterhold under the Archmage Shalador. He split magic into discernible disciplines and began teaching at a higher standard, according to some sources, so that grubby peasants wouldn't use magic. With that comforting image of elitism and classism, the college proceeded to be a foundational place of magic for centuries, even as the newer Order of the Mages Guild rose to prominence in the imperial heartland of Cyrodiil, and the Psijic Order was doing whatever Myrrh and Black level shenanigans they're always up to. There were various other groups across the history, like the College of Whispers or the Synod, but they were all more like research enclaves than actual places of higher learning. In general, you have the following schools: Destruction, for if you want to contribute to nothing except decreasing the population; Alteration if you want to pretend to be a full metal alchemist or use telekinesis and forget all about the defense spells; Conjuration if you want others to do the fighting for you; Illusion if you want to be in canon the most annoying gremlin possible and mess with people's emotions as well as perceptions; and Restoration if you only want to use the basic healing spell and nothing else. As a couple offshoots, you have Alchemy for smashing random nonsense together and carrying the excess results around so you could never use them, or Enchantment for breaking the game using exploits. Going beyond that, you get into more theoretical stuff that you, the player, can't really engage with, but suffice to say, magic in Nirn, while it tries to be neatly categorized, often is more chaotic. College of Winterhold was the center of magical learning in northern Tamriel, and in many cases outperformed the alternatives we mentioned before, especially after the Mages Guild disbanded in the days following the Oblivion Crisis. And once, the people of Skyrim would have been among the biggest supporters of the college's work. Back in the day, the Nords didn't shun magic the way they do now, as such clever tricks were considered just another way to please the gods and be a great warrior. And what better place to do that than in Winterhold, said to be built by Shalador with magic, and once the capital of Skyrim and a center for culture and trade. Yeah, we don't get to see Winterhold at its best in Skyrim. The Winterhold of the past was surely a sight to behold, a metropolis that would have rivaled or even surpassed Solitude or Windhelm. But then came the Great Collapse, a narrative excuse for not needing to use as many assets for a certain city. In somewhat seriousness, the Great Collapse was a sudden surge of oceanic storms that battered the city's cliff face in the Fourth Era in the year 122. Eventually, the constant storms wore away the ice or stone much of the city was supported on, and it collapsed into the ocean, leaving a bare outcrop on the rim and the College of Winterhold, which was totally unscathed on its own stone outcrop. The theories for why this happened range from aftershocks of a gargantuan volcanic eruption that happened in Morrowind over a century prior, to the mages at the college doing it, and honestly, as much of a mage enthusiast as I am, I wouldn't put it past them. The mages of the college have repeatedly shown themselves to be negligent at best and actually unstable at worst. The only halfway competent ones are either old as sin or die in the process of the faction questline. The others range from a self-absorbed librarian that will send hellspawn after you for messing with his books, to a straight-up criminal and source for the Thieves Guild, to a guy trying to duplicate the thing which made the dwarves get sent to the back rooms. Then there's the leader, Archmage Savos Aaron, who is easily the least qualified person to hold the job. Yes, even you, who is made the Archmage after a collective week of experience and a recommendation from the High Elf Jedi, are more qualified to lead than Savos Aaron. Why? Well, we could start with how he was a coward that left two of his friends trapped in the ancient metropolis of Labyrinthian to serve as eternal thralls and jailers to the archaic mage and dragon priest Marokai after he insisted they keep going. He may not have started the expedition, admittedly, but he did push it forward. We could talk about how he never actually does his own work and instead foists it upon his second-in-command Mirabelle, who works herself constantly while he pretends to do things. Or we can refer to how his entire leadership style can boil down to "it will work itself out." The dragons have returned? We'll get someone to investigate it. Eventually. The Synod are poking around trying to get information on some lost researchers of theirs? Don't bother looking into it, just send them on their way. Is the Civil War on your doorstep? Not a problem, it won't affect us, surely. Ancano is shoving his hands all up in a magical ball of cosmic power, which could undo reality? Not a problem at all. Go give him a stern talking to before getting instantly killed. Thanks for nothing, Savos. With the College of Winterhold around, is it any wonder the Nords hate magic? I'd hate magic too if the equivalent of a frat house with lightning fingers was hanging out in the corner of the map. The real question is, why on Nirn is a Thalmor agent hanging out in a Stormcloak city? That alone would be enough reason for every single person in Winterhold, or even most of northern Skyrim, to side-eye the college. That's not even the only example, by the way, as they regularly have contact with the College of Whispereds and the Synod, both of which are imperial organizations actively vying for the approval of the Emperor, and they're willing to contact an organization in the middle of rebellious territory, and can't be doing so very subtly if the Thalmor feel comfortable enough just sending Ancano out in the open. My only assumption is that the college functions as its own sovereign entity, in which case, no doubt the surrounding people won't like the idea of a collective of people that can draw demons from beyond that aren't beholden to anyone else, and why the kinds of nonsense that happens under their watch can. In the course of attending this school, we can see students experimenting with self-exploding fire cloaks, get turned into various animals, see a student get scammed by a teacher, learn of a dangerous cabal of mages that they just allowed to leave to be a menace, and discover a bunch of students who have vanished and died in horrific fashion with no one really caring at all that much. Is this what real college is like? I wouldn't know, I'm allergic to crippling debt. That's all to say nothing of the kinds of nonsense hidden just beneath the surface. Literally. I'm talking about the Midden, a storage/containment area beneath the college where you are sure to find something that can kill you in a horrible way, or something that is itself unspeakable. So allow me to speak about it. A little affront to reality called the Augur of Dunlane. See, once upon a time at the college there was a gifted Breton student whose name is apparently either kept secret for some reason, or no one remembers inexplicably. Well, through experimenting with the strange magics that permeate the college, which I assume are related to those odd pools that can light up, the student had their soul basically dissolve and reconstitute within the energy of the college, winding up shoving themselves far away in the Midden and now possessed of a seeming limitless scope of knowledge. And they just leave that there. You're not even supposed to talk about it because, again, Savos' whole plan for anything stressful is just not touch it and hope it goes away. Which of course comes back to bite them, because you know who doesn't just leave it there? Ancano, the antagonist of the faction quest line. He goes down there asking questions and winds up able to plug himself into the Matrix, or whatever the Eye of Magnus actually is. Which leads me to another question. Does anyone else think that the way they handled that thing was absolutely absurd? I know Savos' whole shtick is to be as hands-off as possible, but it was just floating there, in the middle of the school for how long? And as far as I can tell, all it took for Ancano to suddenly get super magic was to ask the magic 8-ball that nobody's watching and start causing a scene. No wonder the Sijic stepped in when they did. There was no way the college was going to be able to handle that nonsense. They literally required the Dragonborn, actual living shard of the Dragon God of Time, as all with dragon souls are, to be the living deus ex machina that they are. Most factions have an issue of not being able to solve their own problems, but only the college would have blown up the planet without the Dragonborn around to hold their hands, cause ain't nobody else doing it. What, is Onmund supposed to figure this out? How about Jazargo? Is Discount Dumbledore gonna solve the mystery of the world-ending magic gobstopper? At least the other factions have people that are competent. At least the other factions have people that are doing their jobs and not just committing crime on the side like Enther, or having petty rivalries like Nyria and Feralda. Or hey, how about the dangers to society they keep letting out into the world? The Caller and her bunch of freaks split off to do unethical experiments, and the college just threw up their hands and said, "Oh, what are we gonna do?" At least until some dweeb stole their books, and then it was a problem. And they didn't even care if you killed them all, they just wanted the books back. They'll ask 0 questions if you leave the Caller alive to keep doing what she's doing. Nellikar and his crazy teacher were actively doing all they could to make Azura, one of the few chill gods in the Elder Scrolls, angry by messing with her artifact, and all they did was slap them on the wrist and send them to be Winterhold's problem. Or, more accurately, our problem. Another thing they made our problem is a little guy named Calixto Corium. Gee, I wonder what he gets up to later in life. What's that? He becomes a serial killer trying to carve up women to remake his dead sister in hopes of completing a horrendous necromantic ritual for dubious and morally agonizing reasons? Thanks, Savos! Oh, and don't even get me started on the Ratman Hamlin. That should never have been allowed. Look, if Phalion, the singular, cool, probably, necromancer in all of Skyrim decided that the college was cringe and he was free to leave, it should tell you the success rate of people who actually wind up going to this Talos Forsaken school. Of course, that seems to make sense considering their entrance exam is just being able to cast a spell. Congratulations, you can cause spontaneous combustion. Here's access to various tomes and possible avenues for learning the secrets of the universe. Try not to die because we won't be helping. All this is starting to and has been a problem for the college as their membership dwindles. Trust in their institution has waned, and what influence they had disappears just as much as Winterhold slowly does. The city itself is on a one-way track to abandonment, and if it goes, then it would be just the college deep in the northern edge of Skyrim. Arguably, if people just finally abandon the place, you could say that that'd give space for the college to expand. Maybe even make the old buildings into extensions of the campus so people don't have to worry about a bad storm knocking over the entire college one day like it did the city. But even if that were true, there's little to no reason for anyone to interact with a college without Winterhold or vice versa. Winterhold's lessened state means that the college is its major landmark, but the Nord's general distrust of magic means that if it were anywhere else, they'd leave it to fend for themselves. True conundrum for both sides as the animosity continues to mount in the background. At the center of that spite is Jarl Korur, who was raised among the first generations following the Great Collapse, and wholly believes the college to be responsible. And if not responsible, then at least negligent or unwilling to prevent it. While Korur also has a mess of other problems, like a lack of legitimacy and the fact that most people forget he even exists, he's still got the final say with how the city of Winterhold and the college coexist, and that's not changing anytime soon. The Imperial replacement for Korur is not much better, since he frankly enables the college to do whatever it wants and just trusts they'll not blow anything up while they do it. So tough luck for the 10 people who still live in Winterhold. That said, I can see a future where things could turn for the better, under the right leadership. The college could start taking a more proactive approach towards its neighbors, using what it knows to help the city and foster trust again. Restoration obviously provides an indispensable medical advantage. Alteration can transmute one metal to another, which is just asking for someone to screw with the economy, but in Winterhold's case it might actually need it. Furthermore, Conjuration would supplement a lacking guard force, which in turn could empower the guards to focus on something like building some basic fortifications, or maybe a harbor nearby to help with trade. It doesn't even need to be based off Stormcloak or Imperial, they'd just be helping the city itself regroup, finally. On the other hand, the town could act to help bring people to the college, bolstering the population of both and revitalizing its local growth. Obviously, the college could also put in some kind of military aid towards one side, but I don't know if that'd be for the best anyway, since no matter who wins, there would be grudges remaining over the college picking a side like that. So, I think it'd be better for the college to be active in the well-being of Winterhold, but not actively pick a side in the Civil War. Heck, if they had more respect, they could have served as a neutral ground for negotiations between the Imperials and Stormcloaks, though that may be a bit of a stretch, especially considering the modern Nord's opinion of magic. But maybe, Just maybe. The old ways could come back. Nah, not even the Imperial Legion Nords respect magic. Oh well, at least they didn't blow up the planet. Seems like as much of a win as they'll ever get. See you around, losers. Maybe come back when you don't have a 70% turnover/death rate and your best mages can still die to a wisp. But that will be about it for me. So, I don't say this lightly, but I would not want to hang with the Thieves Guild, the Dark Brotherhood, or especially the College of Winterhold. They'd either cause moral problems or give me conniptions. And I don't need that stress. But there is one band of brothers and sisters in arms who I'd be more than happy to stand beside as we remind everyone who really runs these streets. I'll give you a hint. There's at least one wolf inside them, maybe even two. But if we can help it, we'll lower it down to 0. The distant north of Skyrim is a frightful, violent place, full of roving beasts, bandits around every corner, and magical atrocities just waiting to turn you from a person to a statistic, with even walking along the main roads being a risky move for fear of the above menaces or more. Unfortunately for the average person, there is no fighters guild to act as muscle to clear out danger, but instead, there is another group, one with an even older legacy, one that stretches back to the very origins of Skyrim and its people, the Companions of Jorrvaskr, who are little more than a bunch of fancy mercenaries these days with a secret furry club. Sad to say, but these once noble, honorable bunch have fallen from glory more than a few times, and it seems they're stuck in yet another slump. Understandable for those who have been in an official organization since easily the Merethic era, but boy have they found a way to trip over into looking like thugs in shining armor. Hey, I'm the Hearth guy, and while I'm personally more of a mage kind of guy, I can't deny a satisfaction that comes with facing the dangers of the world with just your 2 hands, a couple of friends, and as many deadly instruments as possible, clearing a path of glory, ruin, and probably a few broken bones as a giant decides your subscription to life has expired, but doing it all over again because there's nothing better than sitting back after a hard day's work and hearing about all the things everyone killed over good food, good drink, and good company. And that's a sentiment the Nordic people have held onto since before they were even called the Nords. Because in long ages past, when the mighty king from Atmora, Ysgramor, arrived on the northern shores of Skyrim, he brought with him many of his people, to form settlements and make a new life. But then they got into a war with the whitest people in the world and began the age-old Nordic tradition of killing elves. The long and short of it is that Ysgramor and his sons made a settlement in Skyrim called Sarthal, but Sarthal evidently had something important that the Snow Elves of Skyrim didn't want these grubby Northmen having, so they slaughtered them all in an event known as the Night of Tears. Ysgramor escaped with his son Yingle, nobody laugh, as they sailed away and watched the burning of the first human city on Tamriel. It is said that Ysgramor wept tears of such sorrow that they were solid ebony. His son, a master blacksmith, caught the tears and began smithing something on the long journey back to Atmora. Using lightning to heat the metal and the ocean waves to cool it, he forged Wuthrod, the axe of mankind's vengeance upon the elves. And with that axe, Ysgramor returned to Atmora so he could plan a little bit of genocide in return. He did so with 500 companions of his that easily rent asunder the civilization of the Falmer, and forced them into exile with the Dwemer, who in turn made their lives very bad, but we don't care about them today. This is about the winners. Upon the boat Jorrvaskr, the companions came to Skyrim and did a little bit of slaughtering, and during that they discovered the Skyforge, a place of magic so old even the elves feared it and considered it connected to the days before Nirn was fully formed. And because the elves were afraid of it, the humans wanted it, and they established the Jorrvaskr Mead Hall and the city of Whiterun in Skyrim's center, sometime during all this. Although it's known for a fact that Windhelm was built before this, as this was where Ysgramor set up shop after his landing in Skyrim post-Night of Tears. After the killing was done, the first 500 companions agreed to largely go their own way and establish their own legends, like the bunch that went to explore the Rift and establish the first human presence there. If I had to wager, this would be around the time a lot of the old settlements were first established. But as for the companions themselves, they formed into a group of honor-bound warriors for hire following the disbandment of their army and Ysgramor's eventual death. Refusing to acknowledge any one person as worthy of being their leader and therefore equal to Ysgramor, the companions instead established the Harbingers, a role of counsel and arbitrator who gave advice but did not command anyone in the order. Every companion, every shield brother or shield sister was their own person who could pick their own battles. This, however, created some problems as the centuries wore on. The companions became known to most as basic mercenaries that could be bought out for any wars, and as each companion was tasked with seeking their own personal honor, they had no requirements in regard to whose side they take in a fight. Perhaps you can see the problem. As plenty of companions were hired out for plenty of conflicts, they inevitably ended up with shield siblings fighting each other and killing each other at the behest of lords and jarls. Grudges then would form, and any honor-bound ties between the companions were under threat of shattering. So, the Harbinger of the time, Mrifwil, decided that the companions would never again pick any sides in any wars. Instead, they'd return to acting as warriors of personal honor and protectors of the average person, and in so doing restore to the public's image of them as honorable arbiters. This rule persists even in the modern day of Skyrim, as they refuse to choose a side in the Civil War. The companions also tend to find themselves being representatives of culture in Skyrim itself, as well as mirroring the shifts that accompany it. For instance, at a time when the culture of Atmoro was becoming the Nordic culture instead, the final gasps of Atmoran racial purity began to be questioned, and so too within the companions did this schism form, when the first non-Atmoran Harbinger was named. And that schism would almost end the companions when the very first elf Harbinger was named later on, causing a portion of the group to leave forever. This elf, named Henentir, is notable for a number of reasons. Not only was his becoming Harbinger a sign of the Nordic people becoming more willing to accept elves based off their own merits rather than their race, but according to Kodlak Whitemane, a later Harbinger we'll get to, Henentir was able to ascend into Sovngarde, a place normally reserved for those of Atmoran descent, implying that an elf followed the ways of Shor so closely that even the old gods of men had to acknowledge that he was worthy to be among them. Where's my television show about this guy? From then on, elves and feasibly other non-humans could become full companions based not on their blood but the content of their honor. Further on, the one known woman Harbinger, either pronounced Mach or Mache, disappeared mysteriously, and a string of dishonorable Harbingers laid claim to the title, turning the companions into even less than mindless thugs. So, another Harbinger had to rise up to kill them all, with those left in the order with sterner spirits. And that was Kirnil Longnose, notable for establishing the Circle soon after as a group of veteran warriors that could guide the younger members, and perhaps serve as easy replacements for a Harbinger if another one dies suddenly or vanishes without a clear heir. During the Second Era in the age of Elder Scrolls Online, Uthrod, which had been kept in safekeeping among the Rift companions, was stolen and shattered into 3 pieces. As it turns out, this would not be the last time that the axe that habitually hates all enemies of mankind would get broken. Though the axe was not reforged, the 3 pieces were returned to the companions, but at some point they'd get broken further into 12 pieces. Perhaps this happened around the time of another Harbinger, a Harbinger named Tyrfig. Tyrfig was a good man at heart, but short-sighted, and that short-sightedness would come back to bite him and the companions' circle in more ways than one. For some reason, perhaps due to a crisis within the companions or merely because he sought a path towards greater strength, Tyrfig made a pact with the coven of witches known as the Glenmora Witches, who held the secrets to lycanthropy. This pact turned Tyrfig and his circle into werewolves, granting them incredible strength but at a spiritual cost. Tyrfig believed it would only be temporary, but instead it tainted his soul and denied him and all the others in the circle from attaining Sovngarde. Instead, they would be claimed by a different god entirely, Hircine, Daedric Prince of the Hunt, and dragged to his hunting grounds for an eternity of hunt and survival of the fittest. This altered the internal shape of the companions for centuries, as the circle continues to pass down the lycanthropy, believing it to be a gift greater than Sovngarde. And from a certain angle, I can kind of understand it. Of all the Daedric princes to have your soul bound to, Hircine is honestly mid-tier levels of problematic. He is, at the end of the day, all about survival of the fittest, natural selection, and the thrill of the hunt. Unlike some, Hircine will not lie to you. He won't stab you in the back. He'll always be upfront about how and when he wants you to die, and he'll always give you a chance not to. He's even pretty understanding and a bit of a fan of irony, as it turns out, appreciating when you, as a possible servant, turn the tables on some hunters he wants you to work with in exchange for saving a werewolf he sends you to kill. But overall, yeah, a definite downgrade from the eternal paradise of Sovngarde, particularly for the honor-loving Nords that make up the majority of the companions even now. As we dawn on the Fourth Era, the Companions have settled into a kind of middling spot compared to their pasts. They still do independent work away from any political strife, as mentioned before, and work to better themselves physically and honorably. But in the grand scheme of things, they are little more than an elite bunch of mercenaries or huntsmen for hire, killing wild beasts, collecting escaped convicts, beating up random people that didn't tip you, that kind of thing. It's still not a bad gig, of course, and they're pretty quick to welcome anyone at the current Harbinger Codlack's approval. I mean, Aethys is straight up a Dark Elf, which is second only to High Elves in the list of elves most Nords don't like. But here he is. Hence why you, a rando off the street, will be welcomed into the Companions with just a quick interview. Also because Codlack received a vision that you'd come, but that's neither here nor there. However, the Companions, by Codlack's own admission, is not quite where it should be, especially the Circle. Aela and Skjor are, frankly, too engrossed in their own lycanthropy to be healthy. And if they had their way, you'd keep spreading it forever. Vilcus and Farkas are less certain about it, but if we're being strictly honest, Vilcus does whatever Codlack wants, and Farkas does whatever Vilcus wants. And this connects back to an old grudge they have with, perhaps, the most undeveloped antagonist in Skyrim. Yeah, even more than the vampires from Dawnguard and Ancano. The Silver Hand. A clan of werewolf hunters that aggressively seek to cleanse lycanthropy from Skyrim forever, and by all accounts, it seems like it worked. Older accounts suggest that werewolves and werebears were a constant problem, but nowadays they're practically extinct in the country outside the Companions. The only significant others we see are Sinding, the werewolf mentioned before, the ones dead or imprisoned by the Hand, or the ones on Solstein beyond the Hand's reach. If you take what they do as a whole, you'd think they'd be more nuanced than a band of raiders and bandits that'll attack you on sight even if you're not a member of the Companions, but no. Instead, we don't so much as get a single conversation with any of these folks. Why did some of them choose to go down this path? How did they learn the truth of the Circle that no one else knows, not even other Companions? Why does no one even try to defend the group that is explicitly doing an active service like the Dawnguard would? How come they are still somehow more competent as an organization than the College of Winterhold? We know very little about the Silver Hand from the game itself, only able to work off context clues, but from what we can see, they're actually pretty organized about their work. Able to plan attacks in cities without alerting the guards, carrying books on lycanthropy, as well as potions of curing disease, which I don't think actually works like that, but I don't know. And forging silver swords, the likes of which can't be found anywhere else in Skyrim. So, we have a specialized group of hunters whose primary goal is to kill wild beasts that threaten the average person while working in a loose organization with no clear leadership, but organized enough to plan coordinated attacks. And they're looking for Wuthrod's pieces. Although, I think they're only looking for it to make the Companions mad. That actually, ironically, is the only reason Wuthrod gets put back together, because these two groups were looking for it and they accidentally wound up doing half the work for the other. If you look at them, the Silver Hand can be seen as a shadow of the Companions, which was possibly intended, but boy was it not fully fleshed out. If Bethesda had really wanted to make the Companions' story stand out, then they'd have made the Silver Hand be mechanically more than just bandits and give you the chance to actually talk with them once or twice. But no, just a few side quests where they're minor annoyances and they kill Skjor, but you barely knew him anyway. Kind of a downside of the whole quest, but that's a downside of a lot of quests in Skyrim. You barely ever get to know the people before they die and you're expected to feel bad about it. As it stands, Codlack himself would actually probably agree with the Hand that their werewolf blood was a mistake. Codlack's actually a pretty clever guy, and a lot more nuanced than you might get to know him since you have such a short time with him. Which is why Codlack sends you to hunt down the Glenmoral witches to claim their heads. By using their heads, and burning them evidently, you can cleanse the lycanthropy from the souls of those bound to it, which is Codlack's aim. In a sad twist of fate, Codlack dies to the Silver Hand, even though soon enough he wouldn't have been a werewolf any longer and therefore not something they would have hated. Also sad for the Silver Hand because it brought the wrath of the Dragonborn and Vilcus down on their heads, and in a single quest the Silver Hand is apparently wiped out. A bit of a downside to the companion quests is how rushed it all is, much like the college, and as I mentioned briefly. You're there for a total week or so, complete like 5 Radiant quests, and then you're accepted into the Circle and made a werewolf. Then Skjor dies, then Codlack dies, then you end the Silver Hand before you can really know what they're all about beyond werewolf bad. Personally, I would have preferred a chance for you to get to go on missions with the other members of the Companions, not just the members of the Circle. What's Rhea, the newest member of the Companions, before you up to? Does she have to go through some kind of trial? What's Athos's deal? He's a dark elf but decided to join the companions. Maybe you could have some cool adventures with him. Heck, Vignar Greymane is also a companion, and he evidently knows the history of the companions better than anyone, but there's no instance in the companion quest where you can just talk to the guy, have some cool lore dropped from him, or heck, even get a mission. He isn't even bound by the rules of the Civil War where he would have been shunted out of the city if the Imperials win the capital, because Vignar's a replacement Jarl. So no matter what you do, he's always going to be in the city. However, by comparison to the College of Winterhold, the companions at least know how to do what they're supposed to. All of them are solid fighters, and they constantly train to be so. Although, if there is one other thing that really should have been implemented, was a chance to more regularly interact with Kodlak. Like I said, you don't really get to know him, and having him involved in the main series of quests more frequently would have been for the best. However, as things stand, he's kinda just there until he's necessary. You don't even need to talk to him whenever Skjor dies. At the very least, however, you are able to heal Kodlak's spirit through burning the witch's head in a fire found in Ysgramor's tomb. But honestly, that tomb asks yet another question. You see, inside you can fight the spirits of old companions who challenge you in order to make it deeper inside. So, do they just pop in from Sovngarde to do this? Is this some sort of afterlife in of itself? Are they just magical approximations of the actual first companions? In all honesty, maybe it doesn't matter. They function essentially the same as Draugr, which in turn are their own conundrum, unless you're to believe that ancient Etmorans had far greater magical props than I realized beforehand, that they could somehow allow for their spirits to be present in both Sovngarde and these tombs at the same time. I'm sort of on a tangent, but it's something that bothered me for a while. The trip to the tomb of Ysgramor actually turns out to be pretty insightful for the remaining members of the Circle. Farkas less so because he's a himbo, but we love him for it regardless. Both Vilkas and Farkas come to the conclusion that the wolf blood should be purged from them, and with your help they can do that, removing the taint of Hircine from their souls as you can do for Kodlak. Aela, on the other hand, never does, because you need someone to remain a werewolf so you can become one again if you lose it, and also because she'd prefer Hircine's hunting grounds to Sovngarde. There's also a theory that she and Skjor were an item, so she wants to reunite with him, but I wouldn't suggest believing that if you want to marry her. Otherwise, it makes it very awkward. Despite not taking that chance, Aela still readjusts her perspective on Kodlak as a person, and as you take the role of Harbinger and could remove your own wolf blood, you could easily be the last Harbinger to allow the transfer of Hircine's power. And personally, that's probably for the best. Both Farkas and Vilkas describe a sort of clearing of the mind afterwards, a throbbing hunger which is suddenly missing, allowing for clearer thoughts. Similarly, the wolf blood pulls at you, the player, all the time, especially when you're sleeping, preventing a restful sleep. Basically, it's hyperinsomnia with a very bloody drawback. And honestly, a personality drawback, as all the Circle are shown to be acting impulsively during the faction story, with little regard for their consequences. Farkas reveals the secrets of the Circle, Skjor rushes into a Silver Hand base alone and dies, Aela directs you to act against Kodlak's orders in hunting the Silver Hand, and Vilkas lets his vengeance consume him after Kodlak's death, something he comes to see as a sign of dishonor. In a funny way, it could even be argued that you, the player, get in on it, especially if your first act upon becoming a werewolf is to not run through the Underforge out into the hold, and instead start attacking some guards. Whether through actual intent or just accidental writing, we see the character flaws the wolf blood may be imposing on the Circle, which is naturally counterproductive to their purpose as guides and role models for the other companions. Now, though, one could hope that the companions could begin to lean more towards their honorable past, and over a generation or two, the shame of Tyrfing can pass into memory. Or maybe Aela will keep passing this nonsense on as she collects the totems of Hircine because every single player is hot for the werewolf wild woman. But hey, at least she's probably not going to be the next Harbinger. Dragonborn is probably going to hold the title for a while along with every other title that they have. But I think that will be all from me today. As a general rule, I don't condone stealing. A person's private property should be respected, and frankly, it's just a bad look. But if one had to steal, then I think a very good excuse is because you, as we in the Epic the Musical community would say, have a divine sugar mama who really likes it when we do. Hey there, kids! Ever wanted to commit repeated acts of fraud, tax evasion, burglary, thievery, and general tomfoolery? If you said yes, then you're really bad at this. Everyone knows the first step to committing a crime is not admitting that you're committing a crime. And it's also good to remember, for any of you with moral qualms, that there have been chivalrous, benevolent thieves before. Robin Hood, Carmen Sandiego, the cast of the TV show Leverage, which is peak fiction and more people need to talk about it, and I demand that you watch it. And you know what? I'm the Hearth Guy, and this is a video about Leverage now. Screw the script. Leverage is a TV show following a gang of thieves and criminals of varying specializations that go after the rich and powerful in order to even the playing field. Sorry about that. He's going into the void for a few weeks for breaking his contract. We here at the Hearth care deeply about our business obligations, and so we can appreciate a group of loyal, if downtrodden folks who know how to keep their friends close, and their sugar mamas closer. That is a lore-accurate statement about the Thieves Guild of Skyrim, by the way. Not even joking. Normally, the Thieves Guild wouldn't bother with rich patrons, but the guild in Skyrim is a fair bit detached from the central Thieves Guild. This detachment has made them develop in a starkly different way. The main Thieves Guild was decentralized and something of a group for the little guy. Not totally a Robin Hood situation, but they cared more about humbling the powerful than outright stealing from them. Or worse, working for them. Instead, they followed a code of honor among thieves while obeying the words of the Grey Fox, a mystical role passed from one person to the next tied to a certain Daedric figure. This Thieves Guild, though, is specifically rooted in the city of Riften and is pretty much just a crime family. Heck, it used to be a crime town with vendors and regular foot traffic, and with every member tripping over themselves with gold and the much-desired respect or fear of every powerful figure in the province, amongst which included thanes, old families like the Battleborns, wealthy merchants, and of course the infamous Blackbriar family. People who've seen other videos on the channel may be able to tell what I think of the Blackbriar family, but I digress. The poor wear their eyes, and some down-on-their-luck business owners might even call in a loan from the organization, if they were willing to repay that loan with plenty of interest. They were and are a bit less discerning about who they steal from, save for those explicitly with the guild, like local patrons, customers, or fences. They hear of a valuable artifact and they swipe it. They find a rich target and they rob them blind. They need to reassert their dominance, and their agents rob everyone in a square mile to remind you that the guild is everywhere. Or maybe they'd sneak into a business and alter their ledger to cover up the money they've been pilfering, or even to set up for a bigger theft later on. If they've got a customer that specifically wants someone in hot water, they'll drop a stolen item in the target's possession to frame them. Of course, they also do classic thievery like heists and pickpocketing, with even the palaces of Jarls and other government buildings not being immune to their reach. Or at least, that's how it used to be. In recent years leading up to the events of the game, well, there's been a string of bad luck. A guard walking in at the wrong moment, a poorly placed stick to be stepped on and snapped, and thieves getting jailed or worse, all while funds seem to vanish just as soon as they acquire them. Around 25 years of this, following the death of their guildmaster Gallus, led to the guild's reputation withering away until their mighty crime empire collapsed, leaving them alone in Riften. The vendors they had? Gone. Membership dried up and allies vanished until Maven Blackbriar was all they had, leaving the guild stuck on her leash. A killer deal for Maven, naturally, since she could use them like common thugs and outsource illegal work to them without being traced back to her, but it just represented how far the guild had fallen that they were so tied to a single client. Older members, like its current guildmaster, Mercer Frey, and his lieutenants Brynjolf, Delvin, and Vex, are among the few with the skills and memories of the old days, and they know well how far they've fallen. The younger members try just as hard as anyone, but their capture or death rate is fairly high, especially if all the nameless thieves we see in Riften are to be considered actual members of the Thieves Guild, because if so, then even the guild members will turn on you in public to maintain their appearances. Their personal tavern, the Ragged Flagon way down in the sewer's cistern, has been on the verge of going belly up for years, which means even the personal money the members are bringing on individually can't be that much. No wonder most of them have to sleep down there rather than having a proper house. Except for Mercer, though that one was a gift from Maven. For those of you who doubt the existence of luck, like me, fear not. It's not truly luck that turned on them. The Thieves Guild of Skyrim has an old tie to a somehow even more secretive group, called the Nightingales, servants of the Daedric Prince of Luck and Shadows, Nocturnal. Nightingales are the final form of thievery, except perhaps the role of the Grey Fox itself, which is a unique title for the personal champion/whipping boy of Nocturnal. And the fact that those roles are synonymous may give you an idea of the kind of deity Nocturnal is. While never senselessly cruel, Nocturnal is a cold mistress, a taciturn mother figure who will push and prod her chosen with every imaginable challenge until they're forged into perfection. And if they fail her, or Talos forbid betray her, then every conceivable form of bad luck stereotype you can think of will begin to befall you. Imagine crossing a sea of spilled salt under a million ladders while breaking a mirror every second with a black cat, and you'll have 1 ounce of the misfortune Nocturnal can turn on you. But if you meet her expectations, or even somehow surpass them, then just about everything will go your way. Your every step will be quieter than the grave, every guard will happen to be sleeping as you pass, and the pockets of your mark will be just a bit fuller than normal. Look no further than the story of the Grey Fox itself, an identity and mantle handed from one person to the next over several centuries. When the Grey Cowl of Nocturnal was stolen, perhaps as a way to impress her, rather than just killing the thief, Nocturnal instead cursed the cowl to erase the history and identity of the person who wore it, so long as they did. And for centuries it was given from one guildmaster of the Cyrodiil Thieves Guild to the next, until the hero of Kvatch in Oblivion, under the orders of the at-the-time Grey Fox, stole an Elder Scroll and used its power to erase the curse from history. And Nocturnal seemed pretty chill about it. The guild in Cyrodiil continued to thrive in the years following the hero becoming the new Grey Fox, and Nocturnal simply sat back and let them do so, perhaps pleased with their cleverness, or at least amused enough to postpone their downfall. And with the Nightingales and most other thieves that go out of their way to respect her, the same is true. The only difference with the Nightingales is, unlike the Grey Fox or a normal thief, the Nightingales explicitly contact and establish a contract with Nocturnal, receiving her blessings and permission to act in her name. The average thief might make some extra cash now and again, while a guild thief could manage an actual consistent income off of it. A Nightingale can become rich without even trying, because to a Nightingale it's not about the money, it's about the art. And it's Nocturnal, patron of thieves, that has turned on the Thieves Guild of Skyrim, and that too is wrapped up in the relationship between the guild and the Nightingales. In the history of the Nightingales, they seem to have almost always been chosen from 3 members of the Thieves Guild, including the Guildmaster, as a separate branch hidden even to the guild. These 3, called the Trinity, would become bound to their contract with Nocturnal, to protect her relic, the Skeleton Key, maintain her connection to the material plane and her plane of oblivion, the Evergloam, and protect the Twilight Sepulchre where both the key and portal to the Evergloam reside. Then in death, they will be accepted into the Evergloam as one with the very shadows. Quite literally. In the Evergloam, a Nightingale's spirit becomes a sentinel, and is the very hands of fate that can sway things in your favor, like an army of ethereal batmen pushing things along by Nocturnal's good graces. So when the Nightingales or a Thieves Guild member say, "walk with the shadows," that's what they're referring to, even if the guild doesn't know it. In exchange for doing all this, Nocturnal will let you use her powers as you please, which include being able to become invisible while sneaking, forcing those hostile towards you to fight each other instead, or just straight up suck the life out of another person. Add that to the weapons and armor associated, and Nightingales become pretty high up there in the hierarchy of power amongst regular mortals, and since they're always keeping to the shadows, few of the other powerful mortals would even need to fight them. Which of course means the greatest threat to any Nightingale is another Nightingale. A lesson that Gallus learned in 2 ways. One, where he grew too attached to his fellow Nightingale Carlia, and his love for her left him vulnerable, and 2, his friendship with Mercer Frey, the 3rd Nightingale, left him open to being exploited. While Mercer embezzled exorbitant funds from the guild, Gallus hesitated to call out his brother in the shadows, and was lured in by Mercer, who killed him in cold blood and framed it on Carlia. Mercer then completely forsook the contract to Nocturnal, and stole the Skeleton Key, forcing the portal to the Evergloam close and the Twilight Sepulchre to be defiled. And then Mercer pretty much just kept stealing from the guild, using the Skeleton Key to open any locks in his way, and plotting the greatest heist Gallus had thought up, all while Carlia was forced to run for 25 years. Of course, over the events of the Thieves Guild questline, this all gets unraveled as you, the new recruit brought in by Brynjolf and his incredible voice, get thrown in the middle of Carlia and Mercer's feud and wind up almost dead as collateral. In the end, you, Carlia, and Brynjolf wind up the new Nightingales, adding yet another eldritch horror that'll be trying to collect your dragon soul at the end of the day. Good luck to them, though, because as we all know, as a dragon soul, you're probably going to be going to Akatosh when you die. You three track down the traitor Mercer and kill him, claim the incredibly valuable Eyes of Falmer as a start to get back on track, and you get slated to be the next guild master once all is back on its feet. And unlike most other cases in the game, this one actually makes sense. With the college, you could go the entire questline never using a spell, and with the companions, you don't really spend enough time earning your position. But this? Not only do you get the go-ahead from the only other two people who could take the position from you, not only is the Divine Sugar Mama on your side by virtue of you returning the skeleton key, not only did you kill the last guy who betrayed said Divine Sugar Mama, and not only have you by now pleased Maven Blackbriar, the mortal Sugar Mama, there's a lot of those with the Thieves Guild, but by now you'll have had to single-handedly put the guild back on the map. Job after job after job reminding Skyrim why they respected the Thieves Guild in the first place, while filling the coffers again. You wipe out rival guilds, begin defending the businesses of your clients, set up your clients as enemies and free their friends, and bit by bit those vendors start coming back and new recruits begin walking in. Also, if you have the Creation Club, you can become the new Grey Fox from a quest that has no dialogue, because the Todd Emperor Howard is the pinnacle of making things work seamlessly. Back to what actually matters, the city beneath the city has properly started bouncing, and you, the Guildmaster, can start receiving tribute from the guild, as well as respect from even unaffiliated thieves, and the future of the Thieves Guild could open up in big ways. Now, this may just be me talking, but the first thing they'd want to do as they expand to a new golden age is to kick Maven to the curb, or at least greatly lessen her influence over them. Is that cope? Is my intense hatred of the Blackbriar family and all they work for coming out? Maybe. But there are two pragmatic reasons to ditch Maven, and the first is optics. It doesn't serve the Thieves Guild very well from the perspective of other potential clients to see them attached firmly to another influential person, one who might even be a rival to them. The image of vague impartiality as a quote-unquote business organization would draw more powerful clients, but with Maven so close and often bragging about how she can command them as she wants, it might end up running off possible patrons or even make enemies they don't need. The second reason is about freedom. The Thieves Guild as a group has a fiduciary responsibility to itself and all possible clients to go and do what they have to when they have to, independent of reliance on one outside influence. After all, say Maven and one of their other clients get into a feud, well, Maven's expectations for their obedience can lead to a soured relationship or even outright cutting of ties with the other client. In this case, loyalty to Maven over their role as the Thieves Guild could make them lose money and customers. Another possible boon would be to expand activities and physical locations across Skyrim. The Ratway is a solid place for their main base, and the proximity to Nightingale Hall will always be important, but setting down stakes in other places in Skyrim would likely be for the best. We see that they have fences and contacts in most major cities, and even a few minor ones, and it wouldn't be harder to set up smaller bases. Markarth has old dwarven ruins like the ones connected to Sidna Mines, and those ruins specifically would be an excellent place to set up shop in case someone got thrown in jail, and for them to sneak silver out of the mine. Of course, they may have to deal with the Forsworn elements that may or may not still be present in the mine, but unlike the Forsworn, the guild is not above making good deals with powerful people, like, say, the Silverblood family that owns the mine. If the guild plays their cards right, they could replace the niche the Forsworn have filled without any of the baggage that have dragged them and the Silverbloods down. They have a good rapport with the Battleborn family in Whiterun, and the sewers of the city are at least large enough to facilitate some small outpost that is, again, connected to the prison for easy escape access. The presence of the companions might be an issue for them if their paths crossed, since the Circle is far less likely to face pushback to running them out of the city than someone like Mjol and Riften. Also, with Greymanes just as influential and far less likely to play ball with them, they'd be another thing for them to tiptoe around. So a smaller presence would probably be for the best in Whiterun. Morthal is sort of a pointless place to set up shop, though the surrounding marshes would make for a decent place to hide people or cash so long as they knew how to get back to either. Similar story with Winterhold, though at least here the city might actually benefit from an increased guild presence attracting gold into the local economy. And if they stayed out of the college's way, the college would stay out of theirs. Falkreath is also an interesting option since the Dark Brotherhood Sanctuary, supposing you haven't done that quest, is also right there, though the two groups have always been able to work parallel without much problem. But as a possible location for a hideout, the dense pine forest is most definitely good for disappearing into, and frankly, its proximity to the Twilight Sepulchre would be a good practical reason to set some people up there as well. Not to mention, the major land-based passage into Cyrodiil is through Falkreath territory, which could open a whole other range of options. Dawnstar has similar issues and boons as Falkreath, especially if it's after the Dark Brotherhood questline, but the port would be an even bigger money bag in a time of peace. As things stand with the Civil War, I doubt shipping is going to be super active here though. Solitude and Windhelm might be a bit harder for obvious reasons, as the heavy hand of the law will be more present in Solitude, and Windhelm is such a powder keg of issues that it might not even be worth infiltrating. But Solitude also has a sewer system, which is the favorite home of thieves, as I've learned, and the most active port in the province. With an already noted and indebted contact at the East Empire Company, as well as at least one Thane as a client. Meanwhile, Windhelm's going to be a tough beast to crack, but the capital of a major rebellion and possible leading force of the province? Yeah, there's a big chance for money to be made here. Maybe clear out a murderer or two and it'll be just right. The Argonians and Dark Elves in particular would be in a search for a group that could even the playing field against them and the wealthier Nords of the city. Although I'd wager one wrong move and Ulfric would be very quick to scour them from the city. And he'd be much more proactive about it compared to the Jarl of Riften. Also, they might want to send out some help for Glover over in Raven Rock because, seriously, that guy's just out there by himself. Man must be lonely. But, honestly, all the Thieves Guild really has to do is keep Nocturnal happy, uphold their end of the agreement, and do what they do best. Walk in the shadows. And considering the Dragonborn is their guildmaster for the foreseeable future, that will likely mean good times are ahead. And even if the rest of the world should go up in smoke, there will always be room for a thief or two to sneak, pilfer, and pick their way to wealth and glory. Okay. Hear me out. I know you all like these guys a lot. But maybe joining the ragtag bunch of murder-crazed lunatics who all die in the course of their own story with no substitutes is actually a bad idea. Just saying. I want to preface this video with the fact that I don't condone murder. Unless it's funny. Remember, I am incapable of telling the truth. This is a lie. I am Alfarius, and I wish for the genuine love of Almighty God that I could kill the Dark Brotherhood in a more interesting fashion. But I am the Hearth guy, and I'm getting ahead of myself. Perhaps the most troublesome faction in Skyrim, both from a story and gameplay perspective, is the murder hobo fan club that is the Dark Brotherhood, a pseudo-religious cult dedicated to the worship of an elder god through the practice of ritualized murder for hire. So yeah, you can join that. And by some metrics, they're considered the best faction in the game, at least when it comes to their questline. People enjoy the harrowing and outright evil way you can approach the whole questline and how it makes Skyrim genuinely feel like you can play however you want. However, I fear that this is a fact counterbalanced by the barrenness of what this questline and faction actually is, and the actions or lack thereof of certain characters in said questline. But to get to point B, we have to start at point A, so let's talk some lore. In the shadows of Tamriel, the Brotherhood has been an organization older than the Empire, and by some estimates, older than the previous Empire too. Although that's harder to verify, and there's some evidence to suggest otherwise. They were said to have branched off from the Morag Tong of Morrowind. The Morag Tong has an equally dark history, but for this it's only important to know that they're an assassination syndicate founded on the worship of Mephala, Daedric Prince of Lies and Treachery. Eventually, the Morag Tong was explicitly outlawed and hunted by the Empire of the era, and a schism formed when the Morag Tong sought amnesty from the Tribunal of Morrowind, and abandoned Mephala to worship Vivec. Around this time, it's said that the people who'd become the first members of the Dark Brotherhood felt the call of a much older god than Mephala. Sithis, the Dread Father, also called Padame, the primordial entity of chaos and change, and Lord over the Void, the outer darkness between all other planes of existence, and in which there is no warmth or pain, simply numbing nothingness. Sithis himself is a lot more complex than I just laid him out to be, and has a much deeper role to play in the cosmology of Nirn and the creation of the multiverse, but for the purposes of this video, all we need to know is that he represents the end of all things, as is his nature as a being of change outside of order and stasis. Because of this, organizations like the Dark Brotherhood and Morag Tong revered him, usually with some intermediary being like Mephala in the case of the Tong, though it seems the Morag Tong began to revere Mephala over Sithis at a point where the Brotherhood ultimately split from them. That said, there is another account that suggests they originated within the Thieves Guild, and that their foray into murder was a practical practice for aiding in their thefts, which led to, again, a schism from that guild. The veracity of this claim is also hard to determine. though I'm unsure whether to believe it since it's less clear how Sithis would have gotten involved in the group and why they so drastically swung away from their original practice of thievery. It would also raise eyebrows as to why the two groups can work in parallel so often whenever they have such a messy history. Due to the Morag Tong and Brotherhood's continued feuding even in the modern day of Elder Scrolls, I'm more inclined to believe that version of events. But regardless of which story is the truth, both require the intercession of another figure, a woman and immortal spirit that commands the Dark Brotherhood across the eons. Her origins are also highly up to debate, which is kind of expected with a figure that's lasted this long. In one version, she was a member of the Thieves Guild, as stated before, but the Brotherhood itself agrees on this story, that she was once a woman living in the village that would become Bravil in Cyrodiil, and was a member of the Morag Tong. While the Morag Tong struggled during the Second Era and was eradicated outside of Morrowind, Sithis confided in this woman that he was angry with the Tong for the lack of blood and souls sent his way, so he gave her a plan, and had 5 children with her. Then, she would murder her own children as a sacrifice to Sithis. The people of the village, in retaliation for this cruel act, burnt her home to the ground with her in it. But the voice of Sithis would now be heard, as the very first listener began to hear the whispers of the woman now called the Night Mother. The Dark Brotherhood began to form there in Bravil and go beyond. The hierarchy of the Brotherhood is fairly simple. The Night Mother hears the prayers of those who wish for someone dead, and who pray using a ritual called the Black Sacrament. The Night Mother then relays that information to her listener, who tells a speaker who establishes contact with the client and sends a lower-ranked initiate out to perform the killing. There are a few unique positions and exceptions as well, such as the role of the Shadow Scale, which are Argonians born under the Shadow Star sign, that become offered to the Dark Brotherhood in service of the Kingdom of Argonia in Blackmarsh. They have a special kind of training and relationship with the Order, but as time goes on, they've died out and only one remains in the modern day. There is also the Keeper, a role specifically for a member that maintains the corpse of the Night Mother, ensuring her body can act as a vessel to retain her spirit, allowing for communication between listener and Night Mother. However, again, this role went unused for centuries until the modern day. Another sort of role is the spiritual one, where the long-dead souls of servants to the Dread Father can still interact and appear in the mortal plane by his will and power. Look at the spirit of Lucien Lachance, once a speaker and mentor to the hero of Kvatch during the Brotherhood storyline in Oblivion, now reborn as a spectral assassin that can be called by the Brotherhood members to help kill for them. All the while, they obey the 5 tenets, which are fairly straightforward. Don't disrespect the Night Mother, don't betray the Brotherhood, don't refuse or disobey orders, and don't steal from or kill your fellow members. If you don't keep to that, well, Sithis has ways of dealing with you. That or the Black Hand, that being the speakers and the listener, can just order an entire sanctuary annihilated if there's even a whiff of betrayal. Through the history of the Brotherhood, they've neared extinction many times, whether from outright assault from the powers that be, betrayal from within, or, as has happened now, abandonment of the original tenets. The numbers of the Brotherhood only continued to dwindle as the Shadow Scale tradition became abandoned as well, leaving less recruits for the organization as a whole. Over the last 20 years or so, the Dark Brotherhood has crumbled from numerous internal and external dangers. Internal power struggles colliding with the encroaching authority of the Aldmeri Dominion and the political turmoil of the Empire, making the land just that more chaotic. While there was plenty of murder to be had, they also became targets for all major factions as their sanctuaries became rooted out and destroyed, leaving only 4 remaining by the time the Great War ends. One in Falkreath Skyrim, one in Wayrest High Rock, one in Cheydinhal Cyrodiil, and another in Corinth elsewhere. But, due to the efforts of Imperial forces headed by the living dragon break that is the forgotten hero of Elder Scrolls Legends and a man named Uther Nair, this sanctuary of Wayrest was destroyed and Corinth was shut down to consolidate power in Cyrodiil. This proved to be fruitless in the end, as the sanctuary of the Night Mother in Bravil was attacked under the guise of gang warfare by the forgotten hero and his forces. Though there is some possibility for the forgotten hero to side with the Brotherhood, the end result is the same. The crypt is destroyed, the listener, Alessane Dupré, was killed, and the Night Mother was only saved by a single assassin that was able to spirit her corpse away under the cover of night. While the Falkreath Sanctuary grew more and more isolated, the Order in Cheydinhal grew more and more desperate, bringing back the old Keeper position to maintain the Night Mother's body while she was away from her ancient crypt. This role was given to a member named Cicero. Despite this, a new listener was not made clear. Perhaps, for whatever reason, Sithis grew upset with the Order, or perhaps a more powerful force of fate was working against them. Or maybe listeners are on a cooldown timer and the Night Mother can't make a new one yet. No matter the reason, the silence from the Night Mother hindered the Brotherhood's ability to work further, and infighting began as a false listener was killed and members either died or deserted, leaving only Cicero and Shadenhall Sanctuary for years. With no word from anyone else, the Falkreath Sanctuary developed on its own and turned away from the old ways, at the insistence of its leader, Astrid, a woman whose arrogance is outmatched only by Cicero's madness. Astrid foolishly believed she could run the organization built around the words of Sithis by abandoning the rules of Sithis, including respect for the Night Mother and the old structures like the Listener. But as the only Brotherhood left, her word was law, and it seems that the Dreadfather grew unhappy with this arrangement. Even so, work continued for the Skyrim group as they used word of mouth to hear of people performing the Black Sacrament and acting on those jobs. And the Brotherhood, rather than looking like a professional organization, began to look more akin to a family. Astrid's family. With her husband, the near-feral werewolf and former companion Arnbjorn, the final shadow skill Vizara, the eternal child vampire Babette, ex-college teacher and master of destruction magic Festus, deathly beauty Gabriella, and a Redguard with a totally obscured past but who seems to function as Astrid's right hand, Nazir. And to finalize the Dark Brotherhood having connections with every single faction, Astrid herself was romantically linked with Delvin Mallory, who hid with them after he committed a murder, before Delvin left due to some unnamed betrayal. Unsurprising when Astrid runs the Brotherhood as the authoritative mother figure she thinks she can replace the Night Mother as. It'd be no great shock to me if Astrid had something to do with that, but even so, the two hold each other in decent regard even now. Regardless, they've got those ties and more grudges wrapped up in every major power player in Skyrim, and during the events of their questline, they're looking to stack on a few more, because that quest and the additional side quests involve killing business owners, local nobles, a pirate captain, and ultimately, the Emperor of Tamriel. He's actually just the Emperor of Cyrodiil High Rock and half of Skyrim, but don't tell him that. Spurred on by someone clearly from the Elder Council that works under and beside the Emperor, the Dark Brotherhood becomes mere pawns in a much larger game that we, the player, don't really get a good image of. There is something unique in the intrigue that plays out behind the scenes, of this political warfare that we're just a speck of, but it's intercut with Cicero bringing the Night Mother to the Sanctuary, Astrid's growing resentment towards any threats to her power, and the player being revealed as the new Listener. You work your way towards the Emperor's assassination, killing his cousin at her own wedding to draw his attention, killing the son of the Emperor's Secret Service commander and framing him as a would-be assassin to lower his guard, and killing a famous chef to steal their identity. But through this whole experience, I came to a startling conclusion. Astrid is really bad at her job. Because if the Dark Brotherhood could be utilized like this, to arrange the death of one of the most important people in the world, but they've been stuck as rats in the dark for 20 years or so, what has Astrid been doing? It's revealed by miscellaneous information that there are cases of Brotherhood contracts simply not going through, such as with Maven Blackbriar. But Astrid appears to insist her way as the real matron of the group is best, even disrespecting the Night Mother, an act that directly breaks the 5 tenets she's abandoned and throws Cicero into a rage, leading to her, Arnbjorn, and Vizara's near deaths. And yet even then, she can't seem to correlate her own actions, actively disrespecting an ancient demon woman whose influence has outlasted almost every other organization on the continent, to the misfortune that has befallen the group she's leading that was founded in accordance with that same demon woman's will and the will of the Elder God behind her. The other members just nod their heads to whatever Astrid says, too. Though some older members at first wanted to obey the old ways, their loyalty to Astrid overruled their common sense in obeying the Dreadfather that holds sway over them all. Even Lucien Lachance, whose spirit is bound to you as a spectral assassin, openly tells you that Sithis doesn't want Cicero dead, and for you to question allegiance to Astrid. And Lucien is currently a spirit in the void who has stood before Sithis, meaning that he would know almost as well as the Night Mother would. But you can only ever go along with it. A rare point of dissension being your ability to spare Cicero against Astrid's orders, although that only becomes relevant after the questline's conclusion. Dead or alive, Cicero's fate doesn't change how the final attempt on the Emperor goes, where you're supposed to poison his food while he's visiting Skyrim. A kill that goes off without a hitch. Except that was a fake Emperor that just died of cringe. That's because even now, Astrid's short-sighted need to control everything leads to her own downfall, as she rats you out to Commander Morrow, head of the Penitus Oculatus, the secret service of the Emperor whose son you killed and shamed. She does this out of fear for the old ways and fear that you'll usurp her own authority. But this action just ends it all anyway, as Morrow triple-crosses Astrid and sends the Oculatus after the Sanctuary, killing everyone inside and setting it ablaze. The player only has time to get back and save Nazir before taking shelter in the sarcophagus of the Night Mother as the whole Sanctuary explodes around them. Only Nazir and Babette survive because they have the all-important titles of Skill Trainers, Quest Giver, and Merchant to sustain them. Astrid's treachery is revealed, and the player continues to the final act, reaching and killing the real Emperor, who is extremely chill about the whole thing, and was either very aware that the Brotherhood wasn't dead, or he was planning on it. I'm very much in the camp that thinks that the Emperor had some kind of part in this plan, and that his final request, that you kill Amon Motier, the man who hired you in the first place, was him tying up the last loose end. If not, perhaps he just knew of the plan and simply wanted you to give him a last bit of revenge for his final wish. Either way, the deed is done and the Dark Brotherhood survives another day. Or does it? The Brotherhood, despite having the Night Mother, the fear and respect of killing the Emperor, and a new sanctuary, is weaker than it's ever been. Nazir and Babette are the only members of any experience unless you spared Cicero, but even he isn't supposed to take jobs as his role is that of the Keeper. You get 2 nameless initiates as members shortly after the main quest ends, but your reward for killing the Emperor is almost entirely used up, just refurbishing the sanctuary, putting you right back where you left off. And frankly, after the last 200 years of repeated organizational collapse, I really doubt there's anything you can do to stop the inevitable. Which is probably what they should have expected, serving the embodiment of chaos and change. That there could never have been any form of stasis or status quo forever. Plus, they have put an even bigger target on their back if ever the chances arise for the Imperials. Now, from one perspective, they have set up shop in a Stormcloak city, meaning less worry about the Penitus Oculatus investigating unless the Imperials take the Pale back. Even then, they'd have to find a way into that sanctuary as well. Meanwhile, the Stormcloaks are a bit too busy to be worrying about what the Brotherhood are doing, and honestly, them killing the Emperor would probably be a bigger benefit to the rebels than not. With the Emperor dead, a power struggle back in Cyrodiil is sure to follow, along with forces being stretched thin by an expected search for the Dark Brotherhood that'll likely fail. And that's all on top of the usual atrophy that the Empire is experiencing every waking second. However, Ulfric is a Talos-loving Nord all about the classic ways of glory and honor, so the Brotherhood no doubt would never sit right to him. It's definitely more of a happy accident for both groups than any kind of mutual friendship. No matter how you slice it, the Brotherhood is still on a collision course with the Void, and the Dragonborn has only managed to delay the end. Which really isn't the Dragonborn's fault at all, because the Brotherhood absolutely set itself up for failure in making unbeatable enemies over and over again, especially under Astrid's rule. Not only do they, somehow, kidnap the Dragonborn, savior of Skyrim, who can rewrite the world around them by yelling loudly like all Karens wish they could do, but that same Dragonborn could be anything from the Archmage of the College, the Nightingale and Guildmaster to the Thieves Guild, or Harbinger of the Companions. And graduate of the Bard's College, I guess, but no one cares about them. Realistically, there should be no way that Astrid doesn't get turned into sludge at the first possible instance, and for once, you can do that. No essential marker keeping you from killing her. No, you can maintain your moral nature and kill her then and there. But why would you? A great flaw of how the Dark Brotherhood is set up in Skyrim as a playable faction is the utter lack of fleshed out choices. I made a video essay quite a while back about the art of choice in video games. In it, I make mention to how certain games incentivize and disincentivize certain actions in gameplay and story, inherently delegitimizing the proposed free will of the player by making certain options very clear as the quote, right choice. And in this case, that's what happens. Because if you kill Astrid, you begin the Destroy the Brotherhood quest, which is barely even a quest at all. You just head to Dragon's Bridge, tell Morrow what happened, and he sends you to kill the other members, except Babette, because you can't kill children in Skyrim. Then you get rewarded with a measly sum of gold by comparison to all you can get from the actual faction questline. You don't even get the Oculatus armor. You'd still have to kill one of them to get that drip. This is what I mean when I say you're disincentivized to a certain option, and it makes it not feel like a real choice. Sure, you can choose it, but when stacked up against the greater degree of content in the alternative, is it really a fair choice? So you know what? Screw it. Here's a quick what-if scenario for how to make the Destroy the Brotherhood questline, prefacing with that I have never seen any mods that have this idea. I know they exist, I just have never looked into them. So this is all coming right off the rip. First, yeah, you kill Astrid and report to Morrow, and he decides to recruit you to his personal task force hunting the Brotherhood, including himself and his son Gaius. He even agrees to arrange for a pardon for your part in killing Grelod the Kind if you bring that up. Your primary task in this questline would be thwarting the plans of the Dark Brotherhood repeatedly, and that can start with tracking and capturing one of their members. You get assaulted by random Brotherhood assassins all the time before you join if you got a hit out on you. So the implication is that they have or have had at least a few extra hands. So you pick one of the hits you get from Nazir, or even the one you get from Muri, and have it be that Morrow intercepted word of the Black Sacrament being performed, the same way the Brotherhood does it without a listener. Then you head wherever the job is being done, save the target, and subdue the assassin. And Morrow and you can interrogate and even torture the initiate for information. However, the assassin tries to escape, forcing you to kill them, and so you loot a letter from their body. A letter that reveals the assassin and the Brotherhood's intentions: killing the Emperor. You might say there's no reason they'd have that plan since it takes the listener being present for them to learn about it, but one, the Night Mother can choose whoever she wants to be listener. It doesn't have to be you. And two, Amand could very easily just establish direct communication if he got desperate enough. So it's far from a real plot issue. And from here you begin tracking the Brotherhood's movements and intercepting their attacks, with all the missions combining to be a kind of boss rush of you encountering and killing each of the members with their own special skills. Vizara is at the wedding, Gabriella is after Morrow's son, and Festus is after the gourmet. Each mission also rewards you something different with certain stipulations. And it can still feel like a challenge as you and Morrow are constantly being forced to guess and respond to whatever you assume the Brotherhood is up to. Maybe you're even allowed to fail to a degree, if you still kill the assassins. Your goal is to save the Emperor and destroy the Brotherhood, not necessarily stop the deaths of everyone else. But saving more lives gets you more rewards, like unique armor and weapons, and you, of course, can loot unique items from the dead assassins. The special bow Gabriella leaves for you at the wedding? Now you can loot that offer if you kill her. The same for the ring Festus gives you during the gourmet quest. Although, in this case, Morrow decides to use the gourmet's anonymity to spread the word that he did die, allowing for Morrow to make a plan that this time the Brotherhood has to adapt to. With the Brotherhood's plans theoretically in disarray, Morrow explains his final trick: to lure in an assassin from the Brotherhood with a fake Emperor so you can take them prisoner, find their real hideout, and end them once and for all. You then take the role of the assistant chef and encounter Babette, pretending to be the gourmet, since you can't kill her anyway, and use this instance to take her in. Morrow extracts information from her by starving her from blood, giving a glimpse that even though he's the good guy, he's still capable of ruthlessness. And he forces Babette to reveal the Dark Brotherhood's location and passphrase. With that plan, you, Morrow, and maybe Morrow's son if you saved him, go to destroy the sanctuary with Arnbjord waiting for you. Especially you, since you killed Astrid. Maybe add a few extra Brotherhood assassins as cannon fodder and maybe some Penitus Oculatus agents and just go to town. When it's over, Morrow has you look around for any signs of any other assassins, leading you to discover Cicero's journals and the location of the Dawnstar Sanctuary, as well as its secret phrase. Morrow and you then go alone to the sanctuary to investigate while the rest of the Oculatus clean up in Falkreath. The Dawnstar Sanctuary would pretty much be the same, except with Cicero's words being especially venomous and pointing out each member you killed to get this far, until you face him in the final chamber in front of the Night Mother's sealed sarcophagus. Here, as Cicero is about to die, he reveals the Brotherhood and the Night Mother's final trick: that Cicero, Nazir, and Arnbjorn knew of Babette's capture and planned for this, using the Falkreath Sanctuary as a sacrificial pawn while Cicero hid away the Night Mother and Nazir went to finish the real task of killing the Emperor. With little time to waste, Morrow and you race to protect the Emperor on the Catarrhia, where Nazir, equipped with plenty of poisons and even the spectral assassin of Lucien Lachance, serves as the final boss of the Dark Brotherhood. If you want to make it really neat, you could have Nazir appearing at different points in disguise, since his role in the Brotherhood quests is that of the eyes and ears who gives you side jobs. In this case, he could be running into you as he performs these tasks as the new leader since Astrid's death. Slowly but surely, you both begin to suspect who the other is, but never say it aloud until this moment, where you and Nazir fight one-on-one. Nazir being equipped with the unique scimitar Windshear, while the spectral assassin keeps Morrow busy. With Nazir dead, Morrow and you officially meet the Emperor, who up to this point you'd not been able to meet for security reasons. You two have a short chat while the Emperor appears to be somewhat amused and doubtful that this is really over, hinting that you should make sure all of the members of the Brotherhood are dead, which reminds Morrow that Babette is still alive. You two head to her cell only to find her gone with a letter, where she says she's planning on disappearing for a few centuries with the Night Mother, mocking their temporary win and that the Dark Brotherhood will rise again. But even so, for now, you'll have won, and Morrow rewards you with a proper exorbitant fund for saving the Emperor, and the questline will end with Morrow, having some free time, now able to be a follower. Or his son can be, if he survived, kinda like Cicero. And that is my pitch for a better Destroy the Dark Brotherhood questline. Tell me what you think. Personally, I'd also like to have it where you could interact occasionally with each assassin during the quest, particularly if they're trying to hide who they are, but I wasn't 100% sure how to frame that in this case. Either way, that'll be all from me. Thank you all for watching my tour guide to the Skyrim factions. If you have any suggestions for other video topics, whether for Skyrim or something else, make sure to leave it in the comments below. A shout out to all my wonderful patrons who have lightened a bit of the chaos of YouTube's AdSense program. If you want to support the channel, you can become a patron or channel member for just $3 a month, and you'll get access to a private Discord server to directly interact with me and others in a quiet corner of the internet, as well as be able to see videos hours or even days early, and just be helping me continue making videos like these in the future. But, with that all said and done, I am the Hearth Guy, and I'll see you all next time, around the hearth.